book lovers, it is GSwiz here, and I'm here today to talk about some book tropes that I absolutely love. Well, not necessarily just book tropes, just tropes in general, whether it's on a TV show, whether it's in a movie, just all of that fun stuff, every different kind of medium, maybe even manga, even anime. I will eat all these tropes up. If you guys didn't know, this is a 7 on Sunday topic, and I am the host of 7 on Sunday. I will link the Goodreads page down in the description where you can check it out and you can participate in Prompt in the future. Last week I talked about a bunch of tropes that I did not like, and I'm happy to say that yes, there are some tropes that I do like, and I'm making a positive video today rather than a negative one. I'm really excited to talk about these ones. Some of them are romantic tropes because I'm a hopeless romantic, so there's that. But also there are some other tropes that I know that are kind of polarized in book reading. Sometimes they're universally disliked, and some of these tropes get on some people's nerves, but I am a sucker for some of these tropes that a lot of you guys might find horrible, and I'm gonna share them with you guys right now. I'm not gonna be ashamed to tell it how it is. Without further ado, let's start the 7 on Sunday. So the first trope I wrote on my phone is very funny because I know that a lot of people hate this trope because it is kind of cliche, kind of overdone, the chosen one trope. I eat that up. When the chosen one trope is done very well, like when there's a prophecy and they're just like, this person is the chosen one, they're the ones to fulfill the prophecy, I personally think that it can be an enjoyable story. I mean, one of my favorite books of all time is literally Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. And no, the protagonist of this book is not necessarily the one chosen one. Like, there are a few main characters in this series. I like how Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth flipped the chosen ones trope on its head, and I think that the chosen one trope can be very interesting if you can make twists like that. That's what I found refreshing about Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. As soon as I found out the premise of that book, I was really excited to read it, and boy, it actually blew my mind. I had high expectations for that book. It exceeded expectations. I think that it utilized the chosen one trope very well. I'm pretty much a big fan of chosen one tropes, but not to the point where it's just, oh, I'm the chosen one and I'm gonna save the day, and they save the day, and there's not really too much dimension to the story. There are not too many characteristics to the main character nor the villain. Those are the kind of chosen one stories that I'm not a big fan of, but I love it when the chosen one trope is utilized well and the characterization is done well within that, whether it be the hero side or the villain side. All of it in general. The chosen ones trope needs a lot more TLC than we think it does. I'm gonna say that I love the chosen ones trope because when it is done well, it is really worth it. And we're gonna be talking about some romance here. Let's talk about the arranged marriage slash soulmates plotline. Like I said, I eat that up. But for any classic YA reader out there, a lot of you guys might be thinking about Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. Sometimes the arranged marriage plotline works out very well, and then all of a sudden, it's a slow burn, even though the characters might not have an interest in each other because they're both forced into the situation. Sometimes they feel each other's pain, and they learn to understand each other even more, to the point that the romance just starts forming. You know, a friendship starts happening, they literally become like standoffish, sometimes enemies, sometimes just like, I don't know about you, to like friends, to lovers, because they understand each other, and I love that. Fallen Kingdoms was a good example of this, and another good example of this is a recent 5 out of 5 star read from me, Bone Crier's Moon by Catherine Purdy. I love this because the characters were kind of chosen by the gods to be soulmates, and they both kind of want to fight against it, because if you know the premise of this book, or if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. That is the situation. And I got really excited and chills while reading this book because that's one of my favorite kind of plot lines, because there are times where this plot line doesn't necessarily work. For example, the Guinevere Deception. I love that book, but it doesn't work for that book. This trope right here usually has only a 50% successful rate. I mean, that is kind of based off of what I've read so far, but when it suddenly works out, it ends up being one of my favorite stories ever. As much as I have kind of outgrown the Fallen Kingdom series, I still have fond memories of that series, or at least the early parts of the series. The first half of the series I really love, but Bone Crier's Moon is one of those books that kind of fills my heart up with the same kind of vibes. And speaking of that trope, the next trope that I absolutely love that I kind of alluded to was the haters to lovers trope. I don't know who doesn't like that plotline. I mean, unless of course the hate kind of starts off as abuse and then moves on to love. But guys, you know what a perfect example of this trope is that is absolutely amazing, and I think booktube is sleeping on? Berserk. When I was first going into Berserk, I was not expecting a romance at all, but then I read the Golden Age arc. And I'm not gonna spoil this for anybody who hasn't read Berserk, but this is kind of a very beautiful romance because essentially the person who hated the protagonist was jealous of the protagonist because they wanted to be validated like the protagonist was validated. And that's totally understandable. It's kind of like the hating game, but manga edition. The way that the protagonist and their lover are able to understand each other and to find common ground, and also eventually how the protagonist holds this love with hope throughout the series is just beautiful. It is one of the most heart-wrenching romances to this day that I just cannot get out of my mind as like one of the best. Yes, of course, there are many more examples for hate to love romance, kind of more romantic-y books, but when I think about a really good hate to love romance, it's in Berserk. Okay, I'm gonna talk about one more romantic trope, and that is the slow burn romance. Now, I don't want to mention the series that I'm referring to here, but I recently read a series where the slow burn romance happened. I mean, the first 2 books in the trilogy, you would think to yourself, they would be a cute couple, but they're not really together yet, and I don't know if they're ever really gonna get together. And then suddenly, in the 3rd book, one of the 2 love interests decides that he cares for the protagonist, that he loves the protagonist, and he will save the protagonist. They get together, and like, oh. If you guys want to know what the series is, let me know, and then I'll mark it in a spoilery comment. I was so blown away by how well done the slow burn romance was. When it takes that long for romance to happen, it just lets you know that the time you've invested into the series is kind of worth it, especially if you dig the romance. The next trope that I wrote down that a lot of people get annoyed with, but I love it, especially when it's called out. I think anybody who has recently watched the Umbrella Academy season 2, or has actually even started the Umbrella Academy, will know what I'm talking about when I say the heroic personality. I know a lot of people hate Diego, but hear me out. It is one of my guilty pleasures to see someone who is so driven by their heroicism. I mean, let's be real, I have a low-key crush on him. His heroic personality is just hilarious, and I love that they kind of made it a little bit satirical in the show. Then again, there are so many examples of this in fiction that are just not called out. I can think of the first JoJo's Bizarre Adventure character, Jonathan Joestar. I remember when he was just helping his now wife. He didn't even know her. He's like, I don't know her, but I will fight for her. And all I'm thinking is, wow, dude. That hero complex though. I'm not afraid to call it out. Tris from Divergent has a bit of a hero complex as well. And the reason why she has a hero complex is because she wants to prove to herself that she is truly dauntless in this series. Yes, you can be dauntless, and yes, you can be selfless, but at the very same time, there's a fine line between selflessness, bravery, / recklessness, and that's what's explored in Insurgent, and that's kind of why I like Insurgent, even though a lot of people don't like Insurgent, because she learns that lesson in the 2nd book, and I like that a lot. But yeah, Tris has a bit of a hero complex about her. Even though everybody hates it, and I get it, I love it. I do appreciate that they called it out in the Umbrella Academy, especially because Diego just feels like saving everyone, even if he just doesn't know them. I don't even really need to mention an example for this trope, but once again, it is a guilty pleasure of mine, and that is when a villain tries to manipulate the protagonist by relating to them. So, you know, the hero and the villain has an encounter, and the villain comes up and says, we're not so different, you and I. When they say that, I get chills every time, and I know it has been overdone, but I love this trope so much because it not only gets the protagonist thinking, even though they're a bad person, maybe the villain is right? No, I'm joking. Maybe their side kind of makes sense. Us as an audience has spent so much time with the protagonist that sometimes we actually don't think about the antagonist side of the story until they say that line. And I think that that line, or that kind of trope, is actually very good because it doesn't just manipulate the protagonist, it manipulates the audience's feelings, and that's why I love the trope so much. The final trope that I am going to mention is when a story is an allegory for something, meaning that the story was written for a specific purpose, a real life purpose, it kind of like a story that is meant to relate to what is going on today or someone else's background or backgrounds or cultures. I love that because it gets you thinking. You have a very good conversation. Like literally Camilo and I the other day we're talking about Beastars for hours because it has allegory, and yes, we've become furries because of that show. I love it when story has allegory. Oh my goodness, my hair. I mean, I've talked about Paper Towns and The Great Gatsby and South of the Border, West of the Sun, how all of them have similar allegory. I also love how Divergent is an allegory for life as well, and how we should embrace our differences. We should love differences. We shouldn't be discriminative of people's differences and the way that they think and the way that they are wired. And also Berserk. Once again, I love the allegory of this because it's literally a message about facing your demons and just having hope through it all. The allegory in here is so strong. All in all, I do have to say that is probably my favorite trope in fiction. Alright, so that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to love this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already, and join the community of book lovers. Am I the only one who likes some of these tropes? Let me know if you do too. I also have social medias. I'm at gswizzelbooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also at Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
How did I win half and I flipped it in a double? Started out with half and I flipped it into double.